So given the discontinuation of the NOWPayments app Brainblocks, a lot of developers that have built the payment portion of their app around this service are now searching for a workaround. So I figured I'd make a quick video as I do this myself for one of my own apps, and hopefully it can help someone that has been trying to do the same. Even though it seems like so little is happening with a tool like Brainblocks, you don't realize how much work needs to go on behind the scenes. Not that I would know. Obviously, this exact use case that I'm going to have is going to be a little bit different than what you might have, but there's probably a lot of overlap as well with how you might have your current payment system set up. So I'm not going to go too deeply into the actual code I'm specifically using, but you'll still be able to get a good feel for what the overall process entails. For me, the use case is fairly simple. The user selects the amount of months for a plan, which determines the price, and waits for the payment. After payment, we check on the back end that it's valid and then enable their plan accordingly. So the first thing we need to do is figure out exactly what we're replacing Brainblocks with. If we were trying to do this ourselves, we'd need to have a node running, but we wouldn't just have a single address that we have to check. Instead, we need to make hundreds or thousands of addresses so we can give each one uniquely to a different user and then check that specific address. And then after those payments have been made, we need to consolidate all of our Nano across all of those hundreds or thousands of addresses into a single address that we can then spend from. So I was originally about to go with CoinGate. Everything looked a little bit more polished, but after signing up, I was a little bit scared away from the required verification process, and I couldn't immediately see any docs that were just using the payment widget or for setting that up. So instead, I set up an account with NOWPayments, and this seemed a lot closer to what I was looking for after getting set up and looking in the dashboard. I dropped my referral code below if you decide to go with them and want to give me some support as well. But before I continue, I also want to point out something about NOWPayments that I didn't realize when originally starting this video, since if you're following along, this might be an instant blocker for your case. It seems that NOWPayments has a very high minimum amount for each transaction. When I was testing out my implementation, I ran into some errors and found that the minimum transaction can't be lower than about $3. So in this specific use case, that's okay, I think, but for a cryptocurrency meant to be for microtransactions, this service is essentially unusable. And I likely would have tried a different service knowing this in advance, but anyway, let's continue. Ultimately, who you pick, though, should have similar steps. And what we really want are just two things. We need to display a widget on our app that provides a user a way to send crypto payments and provide an API that we can later check to verify the correct amount was sent. And we can enable whatever paid features belong to that account. I found NOWPayments made this part really simple. From the dashboard, I started by going to the store settings, and under the outcome wallet section, just add Nano as a new record and place your Nano address. Then under API keys, you can generate a new key to use in the API section, which also has a handy link at the bottom of that section for the documentation. What I did notice quickly though, and again, this might have changed my original plan of what I was going with, is I noticed there wasn't any embeddable widget for the front end, kind of like what Brainblocks has, from what I could tell and from the answers that I was getting back from support. In my case, this isn't a breaker though, since the work involved here wouldn't be too bad. What I was hoping for was something like Coinbase Commerce, which offers something similar but doesn't have Nano support. But they allow you to select your currency, and then after that you see a different screen with the payment info. This wouldn't be too hard to replicate, but I'm going to leave that feature out since right now we're only worried about Nano. And looking over the docs, I can see we'll need to do a few steps here. First, we would need to be able to authenticate with NOWPayments, which we can do with that API token. We can get all of the currencies enabled on our account. Again, right now we'll just worry about Nano. And from there, we need to detect the payment amount. So we would get essentially an estimate of how much crypto is needed to send over, and then we can create the payment itself. This payment object we get back will then be what we show the user as it contains the payment address, and then we can later get the status from it. We also want to store this payment object locally, so we can attach it to the user that's paying, possibly whatever they're paying for, and then later on we can ping this and check in a later step that it is paid. In my code base, I'm using the Laravel PHP framework and a lot of Vue components for various things on the front end. And here I have a Brainblocks component already that pulls from the Brainblocks npm package and handles a few of the embedding tasks. I'm going to make a NOWPayments component and essentially try and recreate that functionality. I'll start just by creating a button that shows up here, and what I want to display is the amount that the user needs to pay. So in order to do that, we need to make our first API call to the NOWPayments API. And I don't want to call that API directly from my Vue component in JavaScript. Instead, what I want to do is route all of those API calls directly from my application. And this makes it easier to do any behind-the-scenes tasks or data transformation if needed. I also set up my environment variables to keep track of my NOWPayments API key, so I can securely load it in as a configuration variable and not have that, committed to my source code or something. After some work, I now have a button that can estimate the price of Nano that needs to be paid, and the next step is initiating a payment with NOWPayments and tracking it. I already have a payments table that tracks payments previously made from Stripe or Brainblocks, so I can just use the same table to store my NOWPayments requests, and any returned non-payments responses can just go in this data JSON payload. This way I can check the status of my payment and keep updating this field until I find out it's completed. So now I make a new internal API call for a NOWPayment request to be created. When the button's clicked, we pass all relevant data over and we get a payment object back in return, which is perfect. Next is to format this data and display it to the user. I needed to get a way to display the QR code of the address to the user, so for this I just used a simple Vue component that I came across that did this trick pretty nicely. And in addition, I also added the raw amount to the QR code URL. That way when scanning from an app, it will have the exact amount needed already pre-filled. And after playing around with some formatting ideas, I get something that looks decent enough to continue. Next up is polling. So I need to keep checking NOWPayments and see if there's any change to this status if the user had sent their payment. I should note this should be done as a background job or something so the user doesn't need to stay on the screen. But for now, our Vue component will just handle that check and make another API call to our app every 10 seconds or so, which will then check NOWPayments with any updated status. Now, you might be thinking, I want to check sooner than every 10 seconds. But what I found is one more drawback to NOWPayments is it is absolutely slow. And this might be fine if you're using it for Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency transactions. But if you're used to Nano and Brainblocks, you had a confirmed transaction almost instantly. So this is going to be very, very slow for you. And in my test, my successful response came back from NOWPayments anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. So another potential deal breaker for many applications trying to use this service. As the payment status changes, we want to display those messages to the user. Then we just want to keep an eye on this status. We can mark this payment complete and also redirect the user to their dashboard with the successful status. When checking on the current status, I noticed something also strange about NOWPayments. The status actually changes from complete to partially paid, even when the exact payment was sent. From what I can tell, this is because NOWPayments per charge fee is being taken out. So NOWPayments is saying it's not fully paid because of the money that they took out themselves, which is kind of funny, but I just worked around this by making sure to allow partial payments as technically complete so long as they're close enough to the amount that was sent. So with this little bit of hacking away, I was able to get a Pay by Nano feature working again, with many drawbacks of course. Hopefully someone can smooth this process out with a different service that they build themselves, some sort of resurrection of Brainblocks or some other service. I'm going to keep an eye out on similar tools like CoinGate, Coinify, and Accept Nano, and we'll likely have similar videos in the future looking at these alternatives.